Right, so in the days after BlizzCon, Blizzard have been detailing their philosophy for the classes and specs, and including some of the changes they've made to certain spells, as well as new spells, as well as an example talent as well, to give you an overall feel for how the classes and specs might play in Legion before the beta launches. So, obviously I'm a Paladin player, so I'm going to cover that. I'm going to cover Retribution Paladin in this video. I am interested enough in the changes to Protection and Holy that I might do shorter videos on them later this week. But for now, what I'm going to go through is the Retribution. I'm going to cover their overall gaming philosophy for Retribution, because of course we have to look at any changes they've made through that lens. I'm going to look at the abilities that they've been describing. I'm going to look at the example talent they've given, and then I'm going to have a look at the things they didn't say, because that often speaks volumes as well. Okay, so if we look at their basic gaming philosophy at the moment for the Retribution Paladin, so it says, we're making several tweaks to Retribution to amplify their character. Now that could mean anything, couldn't it? In particular, we're refocusing most of the core abilities on short range combat. Now I read this and I thought straight away, okay, but does that mean we're going to get better closers, gap closers? Because that's been the thing. The trade-off has been that we've had. It's not that we've got like no mobility, we're in better shape than Death Knights for that, but they can grip things into them. The trade-off for not having like chargers or blinks or things like Shadow Step and things like that is the fact that we can do some damage at range. Obviously, we do our damage from melee range, but we've had some abilities can be used from range. So if they're going to actually now reduce us to melee range, does that mean we're going to be getting gap closers? That's immediately what I looked at that. It goes on to say, so many of the Retribution Paladin's abilities were ranged spells that they started to feel more like a caster than a melee crusader. Okay. A new ability, Blade of Justice, which I'll come on to in a bit, will impact gameplay significantly. Yes, it will. Bolstering the inherent Retribution themes, separating them from the other types of Paladins. Retribution Paladins continue to use Holy Power, serving as a strong mechanic for building interesting gameplay. So that's their philosophy. So looking through the abilities that they detailed here, Crusader Strike they mentioned. Now it's no different, unless they change the damage modifiers, and it's working exactly the same as it is now. So there's no change there. Blade of Justice is the new damage dealing ability. 12-yard range, so mid-range. So you can use this ability if you're chasing after something. It's instant cast, of course. 12-second cooldown. Strikes an enemy with the Blade of Justice, dealing strong holy damage. That could mean anything, but we assume that this is a fairly hefty ability. And generating 2 holy power. So, now assuming this is the full list of damage abilities that they've given us, I've only just started, I recognise. It looks like it's a replacement for Exorcism, except it's sort of not. But Exorcism seems to be going, as far as we can tell. It's a holy power generator. We certainly don't need extra ones there. It generates 2. It can't be used at long range like Exorcism could, unless you glyphed it. But it can be used at medium range. You can chase people around with it, or you can chase mobs around with it. So on the one hand, I'm not hugely happy about losing, or what appears to be, we can't say too much at the moment, but what appears to be losing a ranged ability for this, because there are times when you need those to build up holy power. Let's say there are times when you can't be in melee range of something. You just can't. I mean, thinking about it, we can't apply these new abilities to Warlords of Draenor raid bosses, because they will be based on other ones, but similar situations may arise. So if we think about Lords of Draenor ones, or even just Hellfire Citadel, stick to that. You've got times on Iskar where you have to move out for Chakram. It's nice to have abilities while you're doing that you can still use to build up a bit of holy power. Going out for seeds on Zakoon, going away with the Fell Surge on Zul'Harak. All these sort of things, you would still be able to use a few of these abilities. It wouldn't do loads of damage, but it would still allow you to maintain, you know, build up some holy power ready for when you could get back into melee range. So that looks to be going. Of course, it doesn't happen on every boss. On a lot of bosses, you will be able to stay in melee range of something that you're hitting all the time. So, you know, but we're going to get a variety, and it's not good to have some bosses where you feel a bit weak. But maybe talents will come to the rescue then. Maybe there will be some talents that will help us out in that situation. And of course, not all melee get these ranged abilities anyway. So as long as our abilities are balanced around this deficiency, fine, absolutely fine. Now, it sounds like a powerful ability. It might even be as powerful as a finisher, although I doubt it. Now, I'm not opposed to that. Again, doesn't help us predict what our overall damage is going to be. None of this will, because it's nothing to do with balancing. It's just how the gameplay is going to be. The 2 holy power is potentially worrying, because and for a reason I'll go on later on as well, really worrying. But for now, I mean, you look at it and you think, so okay, so you've got 4 holy power. This has come off cooldown. It sounds like a big ability. You want to use it off cooldown as quickly as possible. But you've got 4 holy power, so you're going to actually have to fire off a Templar's Verdict or a Divine Storm first and then use it. Otherwise, you're wasting holy power. So you can't be at 4 holy power and use this. Otherwise, it's wasteful. But then what if you've got a situation where there's going to be some short duration AoE, a bit like, you know, imps spawning in Zul'Harak Manaroth type situation. You don't want to be dumping holy power just before that happens. So it could get a bit disjointed, is my main concern. But in general, it is what it is. Now, Judgment. Similar to the way it works at the moment. Bit longer cooldown. Of course, as far as we can tell, haste will still reduce the cooldown of our abilities. We don't know that. They haven't said anything about that. But it has done in recent years. And they haven't said it won't. But this is the interesting bit. When you judge something, you give them a debuff, which means the target takes 30% increased damage from your holy power generators and consumers for 6 seconds. So immediately, you can't keep this up all the time. It makes Judgment pretty much your highest priority ability. Also, just on the face of it, you think to yourself, you've got to be a bit careful here. On the one hand, you don't want to be using Judgment when you're on 5 holy power. On the other hand, you don't want to go, oh, I'm on 5 holy power, Judgment's off cooldown, I'd better dump some with a Templar's Verdict and then use it, because then that Templar's Verdict, which is your most powerful ability, is not benefiting from this debuff. So you've got to think about it. We've got to be a bit careful. If Judgment's about to come off cooldown, you need to make sure that you can use Judgment and, not waste the holy power, and then dump, because you've got 6 seconds to fire off your most damaging abilities when it'll benefit from this 30% debuff. Now, there's a few issues with this. One of them is, again, if you think about what we've struggled with this tier, or this expansion even, it has been cleave and AoE. Our single target has mostly been fine. Cleave and AoE has been an issue. And the reason for that is that it's not been worth using Divine Storm on a small number of targets, unless you've got Final Verdict. And that's only going to become worse here, because this debuff applies to your primary target, which makes Templar's Verdict effectively even more powerful, because if you hit something with Templar's Verdict, it's taking 30% more damage. If you use Divine Storm, only the target that was debuffed is going to take 30% more damage of a much weaker ability on a single target, and all the other ones you hit with Divine Storm are not taking any extra damage. So that's potentially quite worrying. We don't know exactly where the numbers will stand on this, because we don't know how much damage Templar's Verdict is going to do compared to Divine Storm. We only know what it is now. So that is a concern. That, from that point of view, though, you could look at it as maybe talents could sort that out. Maybe there will be a talent that will allow this to become effectively a buff on us, or that it is a debuff that can be spread somehow to other mobs. That's possible. So, because we don't know that yet. We don't know the full toolkit, which is what makes this so difficult. There is another issue with Judgment, though. Now, let us say, just for the sake of argument, because I've got to make numbers up to illustrate the point, because I don't know what they're actually going to be. Let's say we went back to a situation a bit like in Mr. Pandaria, where Divine Storm was a DPS increase on 2 targets, which is what we want. We want to be able to 2-target cleave. And so let's say we can Divine Storm on 2 targets, Templar's Verdict on 1 target. There comes an issue here. Like I've already said, if you've debuffed 1 target, it still might mean that you can't Divine Storm on 2 targets. Maybe you have to wait for 3 before it's worth Divine Storming. But only while the debuff is up. Because remember, the debuff isn't up all the time. It's only up 50% of the time, maximum. So your priority changes. So let's say you've got 2 targets. It's a 2-target fight. So you're firing off Templars. You fire off your Judgment. You've got 6 seconds of extra damage. So now you're just doing Templar's Verdict. You're just tunneling Templar's Verdict as long as you've got the 3 holy power. Then the debuff wears off, and you're back to Divine Storming. So you've got to be able to change your mindset. Now, of course, it might not be those particular numbers. It might be completely different numbers. We don't know what those are. But again, the fact that you have to track this debuff, which of course is no problem for serious raiders, because you will track debuffs anyway. But the fact that for most players, you've got to be able to, you'll have a different priority system for your spenders, depending on whether this debuff is up or not. It's fiddliness that I just don't think we need. Now, Templar's Verdict, absolutely positive change. It works basically the same way, except it now deals holy damage, not physical damage. So basically, we know that Final Verdict is going, because Final Verdict did a few things, but one of the main things that Final Verdict did is meant that our Templar's Verdict effectively did holy damage, because Templar's Verdict at the moment does physical damage, which means it does different amounts of damage on different targets, depending on what their armour is. Whereas holy damage, perfect, you know exactly where you stand. You can compare the damage of Templar's Verdict with Divine Storm and work out how many targets to use Divine Storm on all the rest of it. So this is a really positive change. Obviously, it doesn't come with the extra range. It's only melee range, just like Templar's Verdict is now. And you don't get the Final Verdict buff that allows you to weave in Divine Storms. But by and large, this is a positive change. Divine Storm itself, as far as we can tell, no change. It might, if it does proportionally more damage, then that would be a change. But we can't tell at the moment. All it says is dealing strong holy damage to all enemies within 8 yards. But then it describes Templar's Verdicts as massive holy damage. So what's the difference between strong and massive? Who knows? Who knows? Is it like now where we need a good 4 targets before it's worth using Divine Storm over Templar's Verdict in most situations? Or can we use this on fewer targets? I don't know. Now, the next ability is a passive ability. This is the one that is the massive can of worms that's been released. This, I have no words to describe how worried I am about this. And it is Conviction. Crusader Strike and Blade of Justice have a 20% chance to generate 1 additional holy power. I do love my RNG, Blizzard. Thanks very much. But it's not that. That's not the bad part of it. Like, RNG is like sometimes you proc Art of War and get an exorcism. You cool down on exorcism and reset or whatever. That's RNG that you can't rely on, but whatever. This is quite bad, because what it means is straight away you don't want to be using Crusader Strike when you've got 4 holy power built up. Because what if Conviction procs, because effectively Conviction procs on that and you're getting 2 holy power for it, you've wasted a holy power. So then what you think is, okay, so you've got to dump your holy power on 3. But dumping your holy power just because you might get a conviction proc. What if there's a period coming up where you're trying to build up your holy power because you're going to have a really short duration AoE, like mobs suddenly spawning that you know are only going to last a few seconds, but you want to kill them really quickly. It doesn't allow you to do that at that time. Because what is your rule going to be? Are you just going to go, okay, well, if conviction procs, sod it? Or are you going to dump it and then you haven't necessarily, and if it doesn't proc especially, you haven't got your full bar of holy power ready to go in. It's even worse for what's it called now? Blade of Justice. Because Blade of Justice gives you 2 anyway as standard. So conviction procs on that and it's given you 3. So now, and you've got, there's nothing you can do about this. If you've got 3 holy power, you can use this thing and still waste holy power. How does that even work? What's going through their heads? This is a real pain in the ass. On the same scale, I would say, as Empowered Divine Storm has been for us in Warlords of Draenor. You know, the difference this can make. Just, I mean, the RNG side of it can be quite big, because if you get this on the pull when everything's fine, all right, we're not going to get the ring, so at least that'll be gone. But when everything else is firing, and of course we don't know what everything else is, because we don't know what cooldowns we have. They haven't mentioned cooldowns. And the difference between getting this procking a couple of times and not procking at all could be quite huge. Or, you know, procking when we don't want it to proc because we've got too much holy power and we can't, we'll waste it. Oh my goodness, this is horrendous. Horrendous. And unlike the situation with Judgment, which could be rescued with talents, you know, choosing talents to go more AoE orientated, this one, there's nothing could rescue this. Someone has suggested we get the sort of rogue version of anticipation. So it won't be wasted, it'll just get banked separately. The whole point of, I forget the name of the ability now, but originally when we had holy power, we had 3 holy power, because, you know, we'd spent 3 holy power. You know, actually being able to build up to 5 holy power was something that was added in MOP. So that effectively was our version of anticipation. Not at all keen on this. And even if we had anticipation, again, it's not necessarily ideal, because I don't think it would work. It wouldn't work, because with rogues, you see, their finishers you can use on any number of combo points, and it just is more powerful if you use it on more. Owls don't work like that. There's a fixed cost for them. I don't see this being rescued by anything. I am very worried by this. But anyway, onwards. Not much left to go on this one. Mastery is just mastery. It's what our mastery is. Talents. They haven't given us a lot of information on talents. They told us about one. Really weird. Lothar's Might. 30-yard range, instant 30-second cooldown. Flings a blade of holy light to the target location. Reactivating will teleport the paladin to the blade and strike nearby enemies for moderate holy damage. Transcendence, really, isn't it? Except we do some damage when we use it. What I would like to know is how long this thing stays up. We know it's a 30-second cooldown, so that's how often you can place it. But when you fling your blade of holy light to the target location, so that's creating like a warlock portal type thing. How long does it stay there? I looked at it first, and a lot of people have sort of said, is this our closer? Well, it's not a closer. It's going to take 2 global cooldowns to use the bloody thing. It's certainly not a closer in a PvP sense, because, what? You know, someone will watch you fling the holy thing next to them, and they'll go, oh, do you know what? I think I'm going to move over there now. And you're just stood there thinking, okay, fine. You know, you could use it at the start of a boss. Presumably it doesn't aggro anything. So you could put it by the boss, and then it allows you to jump in, do some damage to the boss, and then, you know, get into your rotation. There'll be some fights, possibly, where you have to move away from combat and then back in. So again, you could place it by the boss. And when you have to move out, you can use it as a fast way of getting back in. That's nice. It's not a bad talent. Depends, obviously, what it's in competition with as to whether you take it. It seems okay. But it doesn't solve a problem that I can see. It doesn't solve the problem of us having no ranged abilities, because it's not a closer. It's some useful utility on fights where we're going to have to move away from the boss, and then potentially back in or something like that, or move between two bosses. Maybe across. Okay, so now we come to one of those breaking news situations. I've actually just cut into this video. I just made this video. I was about to upload it, and then some stuff came on Twitter. A couple of things just on the issue of the talent. It's not going to be called Lothar's Might. A lot of people complain, Lothar's not a paladin, he's a warrior. It should be Turalian, he's a paladin. The film, it'll confuse everyone. Well, there were no paladins in the film. But granted, Lothar's not very paladin-y. And the developers have come back and said, yes, good point, we'll change that. So it will be called something else, but it'll still be what it is. Reasonable talent, as I say. No idea what this hand of hindrance is that it's going to replace. It sounds a bit rubbish to me anyway, so yeah, it might well be a talent we go for. Depends on what we put in its place. Now, the other thing, I was thinking about, I've gone through obviously everything they've told us. But then what haven't they told us? There's an awful lot of things that could change my mind on certain things, apart from conviction. In fact, if I can use a terrible pun, I have absolute conviction that I am not going to like the passive ability conviction. And I have said so as well. And as they're so interested in lore, I did actually make the point, as we can see there. It doesn't really sound like it's a talent with conviction in it. 20%, it's not really what I'd call conviction. But anyway, on to other things. Now, the list of abilities we've gone through. You look at it, first of all, I looked at it and thought, oh my goodness, because they've put in abilities that aren't really changing, Crusader Strike, Divine Storm, I thought to myself, does this mean this is an exclusive list? This is all of our damage dealing abilities? Now, if it is, I'm not, that's reasonably positive. We don't want lots of other abilities. It's much better to have just a smaller number of abilities and change what they do, maybe with seals, something like that. Not that I'm saying that that's what they're going to do. We don't know. Don't know anything about seals. They haven't mentioned anything. Because I was thinking to myself, they haven't mentioned Hammer of Righteous. They haven't mentioned Exorcism, although we assume Blade of Justice is directly replacing Exorcism. And they haven't mentioned Hammer of Wrath. Now, they mentioned Hammer of Righteous with Protection Paladins to say that they're basically getting rid of it but keeping the effect. No mention at all for Paladins. So I was thinking, maybe this isn't an exhaustive list. Maybe there are other offensive abilities that are not just talents. They just haven't decided exactly what they're going to do about those. But then I thought, but beta's just around the corner, so what's going on here? They have confirmed on Twitter, just as I finished this video and was about to upload it, that there is no Hammer of Wrath. They're complaining that it's too similar to something else. I'm guessing Execute, because it's what it is an Execute. Does that mean all classes are losing an Execute then? Does that mean only warriors are going to have it? I don't think that's true. If it is true, but then what are we going to get to replace it? Extra damage? Not another ability, because now I am looking at it and thinking, this is an exhaustive list of our damage dealing abilities, aside from what we may get from talents. So we may still have Execution Sentence, for example, as a talent. We may not. Who knows? We won't know until beta comes out. But we're certainly not going to have Hammer of Wrath. And it sounds like, basically the baseline abilities that are not included here, it sounds like we're not having. So Hammer of Righteousness. So what's our cleaving situation going to be? Sounds like talents or seals might govern that. That sounds interesting. I'm actually quite excited at that prospect. The fact that there is more to come. And that talents may play a big part in changing us between single target cleave and full AoE focus. I would quite like that. But Hammer of Wrath, because the thing about an Execute is, you could argue, okay, in most bosses you can just balance your other abilities around it. Not all classes have Executes by any means. But then, when you have a fight where there are adds, especially adds that don't die really quickly, if they die in a few seconds, alright. But if they take, let's say, 15 or more seconds to die, that means there'll be a little period of an execute where you can throw off a sneaky hammer of wrath onto them. So on those sort of fights, execute classes do pretty well. And it is a funny one because, as I say, you just look at it and they say, oh no, because it's too similar to this, and you think, yeah, I just think, are you taking it off all of the classes then? Is only warriors going to have this? I know I'm repeating myself, but it just sounds funny because they have said things before, like when they took stance dancing away from warriors. Oh no, it's really bad that. They didn't mind giving it to us in the form of empowered seals, mind you. So yeah. But yeah, anyway, that is all we actually know. No doubt I'll upload this and then something else will come out. I mean, what I'd really like to know about is utility. No mention of utility. I really do feel that, I mean, from the point of view of the overall damage, conviction aside, it could be really good. Having fewer abilities but having more flexibility over the interplay of those could actually be really good if that's the intention. But we need a raid-wide utility. If we look at what utility we have at the moment, 3 hands. Hand of Sacrifice, Hand of Protection, Hand of Freedom. First point, Protection Paladins and Holy Paladins have those as well. So we don't bring anything new to the table. And you know, this is one of the reasons why you do not find Retribution Paladins in top 10 world guilds, and haven't done for a few years. Next thing, now we look at the individual ones. Hand of Sacrifice is the one that is used most often. But it's an individual one on tanks, and after a bit they may not even need it. It's not always guaranteed to be needed. And other classes bring the same effect as well. Hand of Protection, extremely niche. Very, very few fights where it has any use at all, and when it does, even then it's not absolutely necessary. You can do without it. It may be useful. It's not going to save your life. Hand of Freedom. Can't think of a single fight where it was needed. There are a few fights where in theory it could be used. In general, in those fights though, it was caused by someone messing something up and they'd have to be bloody quick to ask for it, because usually snares don't cause a problem for more than a few seconds anyway. So cannot think of, I don't even think I've used Hand of Freedom on another player this tier, or this expansion even. If I have, I haven't made regular use out of it. So it's very poor for a class that used to be the utility class. It's just been stripped away and stripped away and stripped away over the years, to the point where we have less than some other classes. I'm not saying all of the classes, but some other classes. We suffered badly from losing Devotion Aura, and we really could do with something like that back. Maybe we will get something like that back. We don't know. So far, all they've gone through is effectively damage-dealing abilities for damage classes. We don't know what other abilities we're getting. So until we do, we'll just have to wait. But then again, more's going to come out when beta comes out anyway, because we're going to see the full range of talents as they are. And obviously, they're going to change those, so they'll refine those. I'll be doing plenty more of these sort of videos as we go through beta, as things are changed, refined, completely changed back to the way they were, changed again, changed the day before release, changed a week after release, blah 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 blah. That's just the way it goes. But anyway, see what you think. Comments below, and I'll see you later.